All right, thank you. Thanks everybody for joining here this morning. I know early mornings at NAMM are always a challenge for everybody, so I appreciate your time here. My name is Pete Brown, and I'm going to be running a panel here talking about all the different operating systems and their updates for MIDI 2.0. So let's start with some introductions. Like I said, I'm Pete Brown from Microsoft. I work on audio and MIDI.
And I'm Phil Burke with Google, and working on the Android audio APIs and MIDI APIs.
My name is Andrew Mee. I'm the Technical Standards Board Chair and a consultant to Yamaha, and I'm here representing Linux today as Takashi Iwai could not join us.
Hi, my name is Tori Walker. I am an engineer with the core audio team at Apple, and I also work on audio and MIDI.
Is that better?
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
There we go. Thank you.
Is that better? Okay. I'm Tori Walker. I'm an engineer with the core audio department at Apple, and I work on audio and MIDI.
All right.
Do you want me to use
Thank you. And Tori actually has to leave here very shortly, so we gave him the Krabby mic, so he's going to do that. So let's talk a little bit about what Apple's doing for MIDI 2.0. Tori?
Okay, yes. So first of all, Apple has been committed to MIDI 2.0 from the beginning, and we've expanded our support this past year at Apple's Worldwide Developer Conference. We announced new APIs for MIDI 2.0. They can all be found on the developer website by searching for one of two things. One of them is MIDI UMP, just MIDI UMP. Any API that starts with that is new, and then there's also a new MIDI CI related API, which starts with MIDI CI, like MIDI CI. Medici, as I like to say. So those have been available since last summer, and if you have any questions with those, or you are working on products, software, hardware, and want to collaborate with Apple about those things, the correct way to do it is to, first of all, it's a good idea to file a feedback assistant report at Feedback Reporter, and then to send an email to our Worldwide Developer Relations contact. His name is Craig Linson, and his email address is Craig, C-R-A-I-G, at apple.com. So send him an email, and then also send him the Feedback Reporter ID for what you filed, and he'll make sure that you get connected with the right people. So thanks for that, and I'm going to run.
Well, thanks, Tori. I appreciate you taking the time here this morning. Thank you. All right. So thanks for that. Next up, we're going to have Andrew talk a little bit about what's going on in ALSA and Linux world.
So I'm a bit more of a personal Linux user. I've enjoyed, working on that operating system. The best part about Linux is it's had its UMP support for quite some time now. It's been obviously in the kernel and in the ALSA libs. As that obviously takes a bit of time, the actual biggest news is that's actually starting to end up in some of the distributions that people could just download. So you're not having to do your own kernel builds and your own ALSA builds now. They're actually ending up in the actual thing. So you'll see it's actually in Ubuntu now in the latest versions, and you can plug in your MIDI 2 device and it appears, and you can use it as both UMP and also for your MIDI 1 applications as well. So they've got the backwards and forwards compatibility built in, and it's just works, which is actually all what we want. But the other big thing is that they've actually added in a lot of tools to actually help you debug and dump those particular sequences out. But the other thing that they've actually started working on, which I think I only found out about recently, is that they've updated the ALSA team have updated their command line utilities for playback and record of the new SMF2 MIDI clip format, which is actually really beneficial to the work that's happening around that. So I'm assuming that's all good. So I think in general, there's a lot of bug fixes and so forth. We're actually going to be... hello, 1, 2, yep, good, okay. It's just not coming back to monitor.
Yeah, our monitor just died. So.
Yeah, that's fine. So look, I think what we're now looking at is encouraging those particular software and DAWs that are actually using MIDI to be actually starting to look at, going out there and using the MIDI 2 UMP for the high resolution and all the other benefits that it provides. So progress is happening, and that's exactly what we want to do.
Cool, and that Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. So one of the things I do like about that is if you want to build like a small MIDI device or something, you can do things on a Raspberry Pi or a small single board computer or something.
Yeah, I think that's the other thing I probably didn't think about it in terms of, I was talking more about desktop, but there are a lot of devices that we see on the floor here that are embedded Linux, and there is actually quite a lot of support for that now, including part of the actual ALSA work was having an embedded USB device support, gadget device support, so you can actually just use basic command line configurations, and you can have your OTG port appear as a MIDI device if you plug it into a computer, so that's really good support.
Cool, yeah. One of the people that's been testing the Windows side has been doing so using a Linux computer, and they were doing exactly that, where they can create an entire USB device just from some scripting, which I thought was fantastic.
Yeah, and it works really well.
Cool, thank you. So next, let's talk about what Google's doing.
Okay. Thanks. Yeah. We took a little different approach in the design for the Android MIDI APIs. The part of MIDI that's in the operating system is very thin and basically just designed to pass MIDI data, raw data, back and forth between different applications or to USB. I've been working on MIDI 2.0 for a long time and knew it was coming. And so in the design of the APIs, it was designed so that it could accommodate MIDI 2.0 UMP packets. So the same old APIs can pass MIDI UMP through them because the Android API, Android OS never really looks at the data that's being passed through. Interactions between applications can use MIDI 2.0 even on old versions of the operating system. But we did add a specific MIDI 2.0 support for virtual MIDI UMP devices, so that if you see, you can declare a virtual UMP device, and then if another application sees that device, it knows that it can talk MIDI 2.0, and it doesn't have to go to MIDI 1. And also we do have support for the USB MIDI 2.0. This was a custom support because it was written before the ALSA stuff was available. So when the ALSA support's incorporated into the Android common kernel, then we'll switch over and use the ALSA library. So we'll be in sync with I think there it is again. Sorry, I don't know if I dropped out or not. So we'll be in sync with the ALSA libraries. I've also been working on the network MIDI APIs, and this is something that we're not putting in the operating system because it can be implemented entirely on top of the operating system, just using existing socket, the networking APIs. So this code will run on older versions of Android. One of the things I've been working on is a network proxy that will take existing Android MIDI apps that will communicate with the proxy, and then the proxy will then expose those apps onto the network. So any old existing Android MIDI app can become a network MIDI app just by going through the proxy. So if anybody's interested, I could demonstrate some of that after the show, kind of around the corner here. So that's the main things that have been going on.
Cool, thank you. All right, so let me just talk for a couple of seconds here about what we're doing at Microsoft for MIDI 2.0. First, the dates, what everybody wants to know. We'll be in Windows Insider Canary builds enabled by default in around 2 weeks. So it's going to be the beginning of February when folks can start using that. And that's for more technical users who want to experiment a bit. We want to make sure everything is working really well there before we go and roll it out to the general public shortly afterwards. And the reason for that is we have rewritten our MIDI stack completely from the ground up. AME, which is the Association of Musical Instruments in Japan, has generously funded the creation of the USB MIDI 2.0 driver that we use in Box. So thank you, AME folks. And that was actually written by people over in the Amanote booth. So if you go over to the Amanote booth afterwards, those are the folks that wrote the driver there. And then from that point on, we wrote a Windows service, the transport plugins, an SDK for applications, et cetera, all on top of that. Now, the philosophy that we had here for creating this in Windows is that an application shouldn't need to know what type of MIDI endpoint it's talking to. So MIDI 1.0 devices, MIDI 2.0 USB devices, network MIDI 2.0 devices, app-to-app MIDI, loopback MIDI, virtual app devices. Those all just show up as the same type of endpoint in Windows, and an application only needs to know how to talk to our MIDI APIs to be able to use any of those. It can, of course, query to find out exactly what they're talking to and get additional information about them, but it's not required. So, for example, we have the network MIDI 2.0 prototype. It's actually visible on the wall behind us. Phil and I were just experimenting with it earlier, where we had the Android device talking to the Windows device over network MIDI. Super fun stuff. That application that's there, which is Bremer's Multitrack Studio, it talks to our API, talks to our SDK. Didn't need to know anything about network MIDI 2.0, but it was able to record notes from these other devices. So that's one of the big things there. So the early test versions have been out in the Canary build, or Insider Canary build, since October-ish or so. We've gotten validation from all the different testing partners, working with Roland and Yamaha and Korg and all these other companies, Native Instruments, Steinberg, and everybody do testing on that. The fully enabled version I mentioned is going to be in box next month. I should mention that existing applications that don't have any changes made at all and don't use the SDK will light up automatically with things like multi-client support and access to some new devices. They won't get full MIDI 2.0 capabilities, but they'll get access to these same devices. We do all the translation between MIDI 1.0 and 2.0 in the service, so we make that completely transparent. Of course, if you haven't had a chance, go visit the Snapdragon booth, which is just behind the Behringer building over there. We have Cubase 14 over there running on Snapdragon ARM64 devices using the new MIDI 2.0 stack, as well as our preview version of our inbox ASIO driver that's going to be coming around the end of this year. Yeah, sure, check out the networked MIDI 2.0 preview in the other booths. Okay, and with that, I think I'd like to open it up to questions for anybody in the audience here. So ask away.
Thank you, gentlemen. My question is, as the technology evolves, can you hear me? Okay. Do you have to do things, or do you do things to give the MIDI I/O priority to make sure the timing is good? It seems like modern hardware has unlimited power, but modern software seems to use it. I mean, other system applications. Do you do things to assure the priority of MIDI at the OS level?
Okay, I'll talk about it. So yes, we do. It has to do with just kind of being smart about how we're handling the threading. In our new version of our MIDI stack, we also rewrote the way that the service and the driver communicate with each other. So we're using the same infrastructure that we use for our real-time audio. So MIDI messages are going across the same type of buffer transfer, as opposed to the iOctal stuff that we were doing before with USB MIDI 1, which was much slower. So yeah, we've had to do a lot of things like that. Then we also have to balance it with, Windows has this concept of a real-time multimedia thread that's called MMCSS, which is a very limited resource in Windows, and we want to make sure that apps that need that for actual audio processing have those available. So we kind of step back just a little bit behind that and try to be as fast as possible. And we're getting, really good performance for USB, but also we're getting great performance on the network, the new network MIDI 2.0 stack. So I'm pretty happy with that. Anything? No? Okay. Other questions? Nobody's going to ask another question? We're going to have to sit here uncomfortably for 10 minutes if there are more questions. So.
Can we get a round of applause for our panelists? How about that?
Thank you all so much. And please be sure to visit all the MIDI demonstrations here behind us, especially the ones on the other side of the wall. Thank you.